listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast, the most listened to daily Miami Dolphins podcast on the internet.
Miami's got the Dolphins, the greatest of all.
Come on, Dolphins fans. Time to fins up.
We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl. 'Cause we're the Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one.
Hello, Miami Dolphins fans, and thank you for listening to another episode here of the DolphinsTalk.com podcast. I am your host, Michael Leva, joined, as I am each and every Tuesday, by Josh Moser from WSVN 7, South Florida's #1 news station. Josh, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing as good as can be. Personal life is great. Sports life, not so much these days, but that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, Bills look good. I know Dolphins fans want to hear it, but they look real good.
So it reminds me, when they lost their superstar wide receiver who seemed like he was more trouble than he was worth. Sometimes it's addition by subtraction. And when they moved on from Diggs, it kind of reminds me of the Giants in 07 or 08 when they moved on from Shockey. It's like everyone else just could take a deep breath and just play football. And they won a Super Bowl. And I think for the Bills, I don't know if they're going to win a Super Bowl, but it seems like everything's clicking without him there anymore. And it might be addition by subtraction for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen, I know Dolphins fans don't want to hear it, but I mean, he's a top 3 quarterback in the league. I think it's hard to argue against it. And, the defense has been very good for that team as well. And, yeah, they look like the reigning divisional champions, and I would probably expect him at this point to win it again here for the 3rd consecutive year.
Yeah, I think they will. And I think part of the reason why is what we're going to talk about on today's show, how the Miami Dolphins are 1-2 and things aren't going as planned right now. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the sponsor of tonight's show, Caneswear. Caneswear is the place to go for officially licensed apparel for the Miami Dolphins, the Heat, your Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, the Hurricanes, and all of the professional and college teams in South Florida. Looking for the latest jersey, a gift, or the newest hat to hit the market for your favorite South Florida team? Check out Caneswear for their overwhelming selection of sports apparel. Located at 2655 South University Drive in Davie, Florida, Caneswear has it all. Not in South Florida? Don't worry. Visit Caneswear.com to shop their inventory from the comfort of your home. And yes, they ship internationally as well. Caneswear.com is the spot that Miami fans shop. That's Caneswear.com. So let's talk a little bit about Sunday's game versus Seattle. And kind of what I summed it up down to, I think, for a lot of fans of the Dolphins is I don't think fans are necessarily upset that they lost on the road in Seattle with a backup quarterback. It's how they lost. It seems like the game really wasn't competitive from the beginning. The team couldn't line up right at times. They seemed unprepared. I know part of that's having a backup quarterback. I think you have to factor that in. But in general, this team just looked like it was unprepared and it was really non-competitive. I mean, when you get a turnover and you got first and goal at the 6 and you can't score a touchdown, that's when you know you're having a rough day. What are some of your thoughts on the loss to Seattle this past Sunday?
Well, all week it was Skylar Thompson's the guy. And you let go of Mike White, who you paid 2 years, $8 million for, who was a very good backup quarterback in the previous offseason cycle. And they basically let him go for cap space. And, obviously Skylar was not the guy. I understand it's one of the loudest stadiums to play in 100%. Crowd noise was a factor. But we're talking about Skylar Thompson, who's been in the system for 3 years. He almost beat the Bills in a playoff game in 2022, the 2023 game following the 2022 season. And you have enough on this roster to go out and beat a Seahawks team. You should. You thought that you did. So to me, that would be the most glaring situation. Now, we've talked offensive line, and Chris Grier kept saying, to the media, we've got enough. And Teron Armstead, when healthy, he's a special player. But when he's not, that offensive line completely changes. And Robert Jones is hurt. You just don't have the depth there. And that to me was, you've got to figure out how to get that offensive line addressed. And then I think you have to put it on Mike McDaniel too. I mean, this is his offense. This is supposed to be year 3. And I understand that Tua was a top quarterback in the league last year, the number 1 offense in the league, but you should have enough to do something. You didn't do anything in this game. And Mike McDaniel, you're the guru. You're the one that has this scheme, and you're supposed to, be putting players in position. And that just simply didn't happen. Now, it's not all on Skylar Thompson. It's not all on Tyreek Hill. It's not all on Mike McDaniel. I mean, there were just so many things that went wrong, and it seemed like it just snowballed. And, again, this was a team that was supposed to be a Super Bowl contender. And we're going to find out about a lot about this team this week, because you have enough. I still think you have enough to beat the Titans at home. And you've got to show that you've got some grit and you can come back. And, it was devastating. And you had 10 days off. You had a Thursday night game. You had extra rest. So you knew Tua was out. You had more time to prepare. And you came out and you laid an egg.
Yeah, it was concerning that someone like Tim Boyle looked more comfortable and in control of the offense, and he's only been here 3 weeks, than Skylar Thompson, who's been here 3 years. That, to me, was kind of alarming. It's like, he's been here 3 years, Skylar, and, I don't know. It's just, that didn't work. And also the pre-snap penalties, not lining up right, stuff like that. It looked like a team, and I think it all goes back to the month of August. I know they're an older team, Miami. Guys like Armstead, they don't want to practice every day. Guys like Raheem Mostert, they don't want to practice every day. It looks like a team that hasn't practiced or played together much. And I understand in August they gave out a lot of veteran rest days to certain players, which I get. But I think, if everyone's still employed a year from now, they might need to rethink this philosophy, because you're opening up a year with a bunch of guys who don't look like they're ready to play because they haven't practiced much in August together. I know some of the things were with injuries, like with an Aaron Brewer and stuff. Okay, nothing to do about that. But a lot of guys didn't practice much in August, and it kind of shows.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to get this argument. Someone specific to Teron Armstead, I think he's fine.
Yeah, he's the one exception. But there was a lot of other guys too.
Right, but there is something about offensive line continuity, where you have the 5 guys moving together, and obviously there were injuries in this game. But I think the biggest thing that the players talked about today was that the crowd noise, they couldn't get the play call in. They weren't on the same page. They didn't know where they needed to be. We have to remember, this is the first road game of this season, so it is new personnel, but this is the 3rd year of the offense. And with the expectations where they are, to me, there's no excuses. And I mean, outside of Devon Achane, it seems like the offense is now running through him. And I understand that there's more two-shell and the deep bomb isn't there, but you're Mike McDaniel. Figure out a way to put Tyreek in a position so that, scheme him up, get him so that he's open. The same with Jaylen Waddle. You've got to get your primetime players the ball in a position to do something in the open field, and then just let them do their thing. I mean, that's your job. But yeah, and then, defensively, I really think the defense isn't that bad. They made some mistakes.
No, they're not. Yeah.
But I mean, I think they were 80% good, 20% bad. I think Zach Sealer continues to be great. He had a phenomenal game. I think Calais Campbell at 38 years young is playing well. I would love to see more from Jordan Poyer in the back. I think he hasn't quite figured it out yet. He just paid Jalen Ramsey, to be the highest paid corner in the league, $24.1 million a year. You want more from him. It's also tough when you lose Fuller to a concussion. Now you've got Cater out there. We hopefully will see Cam Smith. We still haven't heard him. And then, we keep talking about this third wide receiver. Like, who is somebody that can help? Jonnu Smith, nowhere to be found. I mean, David Long's playing well in the middle of that defense, but
they're playing well on defense. And he's been, I think, Weaver so far, some people had some concerns about him. The second half of all these games, now I know the game with the Bills was kind of out of hand, so they didn't have to do much really. But really, the second half of all these games, he's making some sort of adjustment, and they're playing well overall. But in the second half, they're playing exceptionally well. So I think that side of the ball, now they do have to factor in some injuries, because I think they're going to be without Storm Duck and Kendall Fuller this week, possibly, which means you're going to have to call up either Nick Needham or an Ethan Bonner. Okay, well, it's fine, I guess. But it's like they're playing well enough to where if the offense can just be competent,
Totally.
They should be at least in these games, not be. They were blown out by the Bills at halftime. This game versus Seattle, once they got to 10 or 11 points, if you had no faith Miami was going to score even that many.
Yeah, I mean, I think the defense is playing well enough for you to win games, but I know the Dolphins fans in the back of their head are like, man, we barely just beat the Jags, and the Jags just got trounced by the Bills. So, like, what is this team? And you paid, I'll call it aging players, this offseason to bring them back. And, you need those young guys. You want to see Chop Robinson flash. Quite haven't seen that yet. We know we've got Paul got some reps here in this last game, but you want to see these players start to go. And outside of Devon Achane, we really haven't seen too much. Jaylen Wright had a couple of nice little wiggles. Jeff Wilson's kind of become a non-factor. They've been going away from him. So, yeah, a lot to comb through, figure out a game plan. And, I mean, that's the thing, Mike. They don't know who their starting quarterback's going to be on Monday night. They have no idea. And I think it all hinges on Tua's health. And the big question is Tua coming back or not? And where he's at in the protocol. And the answer is we don't know. I will say, normally when you sustain a concussion, doctors advise against somebody flying, especially a cross-country flight that's 6 hours. And we know that Tua on last week went to Disney on Ice with Raheem. And so, like, to me, these are good signs. Like, if you're going to fly and do all of this, it seems like you're healing. Or that means that kind of like, hey, you're maybe shelved for the year.
Yeah.
So it's either extreme.
One of the two. Yes, I would think it's one of the two. Because
Yeah.
even the thing this week that came out from Adam Schefter, he was supposed to meet last week with the neurologist. There was a conflict. Like, you would think there'd be some sense of urgency, like, dude, clear your schedule. I'll pay whatever it takes. Or work late one night. I'll be there. They didn't seem to care. It's like, don't worry about it. You know what I mean? So it's like one of the two extremes. I don't know which one.
Well, I mean, in a lot of times in situations like this, it's like, when somebody gets in a car accident, you want to give it time to let the body go back to as much of its natural state as you can, just so that the MRI
the swelling go down and stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you normally don't get an MRI right away. So it doesn't bother me too much. I don't think that, but yeah, it's just to go cross country on the flight. I think that would be a good sign to his health, because obviously if he wasn't healthy enough, he should not have flown. And then it's a question of, if you look at when he could possibly come back, week 8 against the Cardinals, it's a very winnable game this week against Tennessee. I think it's a very winnable game against the Patriots. And the Colts have no idea what their identity is right now. And so these are 3 games you could potentially win. You're not going to be favored, but I mean, these are 3 winnable games. And if you somehow get to 3-4, 3-3, I mean, then you're in the mix. And then you still have the trade deadline. So I think that's what Chris Grier is trying to figure out, right now. But for the people that are saying Carson Wentz or Ryan Tannehill, these guys don't know the offense. There's to pay that kind of money for, unless you really know what's going to happen with Tua, those are not realistic options. So I'm curious to see what happens at practice on Thursday. Mike McDaniel did say today that they're going to pick either Boyle or Huntley if Skyler can't go. So tomorrow's a rest day for the team. Thursday they'll practice. They'll see where Thompson's at. He would be the guy if he can play. And then they'll have a practice, and they're going to make a decision, because they're going to have to cater the game plan to either Huntley or Boyle.
Yeah, that sort of leads to my next question. Are they going to cater the game plan? Because it looks like with Skyler, he called the same type of game that he would have called with Tua. And that I think there was one series where there was like an 8-yard run, a 13-yard run, which it's clearly working. Then it was pass. And it's like, dude, you don't have Tua out there to maybe call that type of game. It seemed like just from my novice eyes that he called the same type of game that he would have if he had Tua. And I don't know if that's going to work with any of these guys. I think he does have to change it somehow. And I don't know. It's year 3. He's been through this once in 2022 with Skyler and Bridgewater. If he hasn't learned by now, you can't call the same type of game. I don't know if fans have much faith in him changing it up some, which should seem pretty obvious, but don't you think this is now kind of in Mike's lap to where he has to navigate this more with whoever the quarterback is?
Right. And I mean, he got the extension this offseason, but the reality is that Mike McDaniel's the perfect head coach for Tua. And Tua and Mike will be married together as a duo. long after their football tenure. I mean, those two will be very close friends, confidants, coach-player relationship, whatever you want to call it. But this is now about winning football games. And I understand that you have Tua there for 17 games last year. But like you said, this is a system that is supposed to work regardless of who's at quarterback. So the reality is you have to cater it to your pieces to make them feel most comfortable, and you want to accentuate their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. And, you could also look at it the other way of okay, the defenses are doing this, how do I maneuver my chess pieces so that players are open? I have to put people in certain spots. And to me, this is what Mike McDaniel was so good at. And I mean, this is where, Sean McVay, look what he just did in that comeback win over Shanahan and the 49ers. I mean, these are all the guys off the same tree. This is everything that we've been talking about. And now McDaniel has to do this. So regardless of who's at quarterback, this needs to be a competitive game. And I mean, this again is a game that realistically the Dolphins should win. And if Mike McDaniel is capable of what everybody thinks that he's capable of, I mean, you should see the Dolphins in the win column Monday night.
Yeah.
Will that happen?
I don't know. That's going to be the big question. And I think even if there's no Kendall Fuller, even if there's no Armstead, I still think, look, the Titans, I'll say this about the Titans. You can make a case. I know they're 0-3. Week 1, they handed the game away to the Bears. Literally handed it away because I don't think Chicago scored an offensive touchdown, and they still found a way to beat them. And then week 2 versus Jets, they were in it versus Jets literally right down to the end. You can beat the Titans, but the Titans got some players. They got 3 very good wide receivers in Hopkins, Ridley, and Boyd. They got 2 running backs in Pollard and Spears who can play. If Will Levis just doesn't turn it over, their offense should do okay versus Miami. It really comes down to, can the Dolphins offense and whoever the quarterback is, can they figure it out? And I have to think this is a week after what we just saw. They have to find ways to get the ball to Hill and Waddle, and they have to stick with the running game if it's working. And if they don't, it's going to be, I think you have some frustrated fans at Hard Rock on Monday evening if that's not the case. It's almost doesn't matter who the quarterback is in some way. I think it matters more what's the game plan. Let's try to get the ball in these guys' hands any way possible. Screen pass, reverse, whatever. They're too good and you're paying them too much not to get the ball in their hands and let them make plays.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But, we talked about the defense. The defense should be good enough to keep you in this game. I mean, the offense doesn't need to do anything crazy. You just need to be efficient and be productive, play the field position game. You don't need to score 30 points to beat the Titans. So this is a big week for the Dolphins. I mean, there's a big difference between being 2-2 and 1-3. I think at 1-3, it's under a 15% chance of making the playoffs. And I understand the Bills are where they're at, but I mean, you have, a very winnable division in the Jets who are up and down, and we don't know what the Patriots are yet either. So, you're talking about picking up 4 wins right there. You could beat both those teams twice. And, there's hope. It's only week 3, but it's time to flip the page here and play a lot better than you did in Seattle. Seattle was just, it's almost one of those games where you're just like, this was terrible. This is not our identity.
No need to watch the tape.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, because if they go 1-3, you also have to remember they had 3 of the first 4 at home, which makes it even sting a little bit more because now you're going to be on the road more often the rest of the way from here. That's why I think this is such a big game. It's going to tell us a lot about the rest of the season, actually, which you usually don't say in week 4. It's it's a must-win. But this is kind of a must-win game. It really is for this team. Maybe not for other team, but for this Miami team, where they are with their starting quarterback on the shelf. This is as must-win of a game as there is, and I don't want to think about if they lose it, but if they do, it's going to be uphill battle the rest of the way, even more so than it is now.
Yeah, you go to 1-4, 1-5. I mean, at that point, there's no reason to even bring Tua back,
or Chubb.
Odell Beckham Jr. What are you going to do with him?
But then you start trading off guys at the deadline.
Exactly. Now you're going to rebuild. Who are you giving away? You just paid Waddle. You just re-upped Tyreek.
Holland, maybe.
Is Jaylen Phillips a piece that you trade because you don't know if you can give him a long-term deal? It's David Long would be a piece that a lot of teams would want. You got to pay Javon Holland. What's going to happen there? So, we're not there yet.
We're not there yet, but it's getting late early. So I'll say that.
Late. It's only September, man.
I know, but this league, it does go by fast. It goes by so fast, and if they were again, I always like to say there's a lot of context. Cincinnati's 0-3. Joe Burrow played really well last night. He ain't the reason they lost. And they can clean up this, clean up that, and they can turn that around rather quickly because they have the pieces there. They're not playing so awful. They almost beat the Chiefs. They almost beat, Washington. They're 0-3, but there's a context around that 0-3.
Yeah, but
they could easily be 2-1. Miami's
the toughest division, though. That division is brutal.
True. But the point is they're not playing inept football. What we saw from Miami last Sunday was inept football, and your starting quarterback is going to miss at least a few more games. That's the context there where if this continues, you have a win, they don't. I'd rather be in their situation than ours maybe, though, because of all the other outstanding factors around each team right now. So Miami might be 1-2 and be a little bit ahead of them, which I found amazing. If the season ended today, Miami's a playoff team, which it's kind of silly, but it's like, really, did anyone watch the last 2 games? Because they did not look like anything near a playoff team.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's even harder just because the expectations were so high. It's been 23 years of waiting, and I think even for the players, I mean, they were so close last year, and they feel it. But man, I mean. I talked to Drew Rosenhaus about this, and I think it's really interesting on how the Dolphins constructed their roster. You look at Joe Flacco, you look at what Justin Fields is doing in Pittsburgh, you look what
Sam Darnold
and Andy Dalton, just how he played. Like, the backup quarterback position is so important, and it just, again, Skylar Thompson was going to be the guy. You hope that it chalk it up as a bad game, but, you can't waste this roster with how you put it together. Like, you just can't do it. It's going to be a blow up if they can't figure this thing out. And but hey, you've got the Titans again and the Patriots. These are 2 very winnable games.
With a backup quarterback, they're very winnable.
And you're 3-2, and then you're right back in the mix. And then there's optimism.
And then you're asking every day, when's he coming back to it? When's he coming back to it? When's he coming back? And then there's a lot of reasons to hope he can. Obviously, his health is paramount, but if he can, it's like, okay, because when he comes back, then you can start being like, okay, maybe we can get hot. Maybe we can go on a run. And I think my earphones just went off. Because then you can go on a run and try to salvage this.
Yeah, I covered the Packers, and they won 7 in a row to get into the playoffs one year. So, and I believe here in Miami, a couple years ago, they won 7 in a row.
It was a final year of Flores. They started off like 1-6, 1-7, and they won every game up to that Titans game where they got blown out by Ryan Tannehill. Then they're out of the playoffs, and they still won the next week versus the Bills.
That was, so it can be done. So, but again, like, looking at the back half of the schedule, like
Thanksgiving
Packers Thanksgiving, and then the Jets twice,
San Francisco,
it's
Houston.
It's a gauntlet. But. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about.
We got a lot to talk about, and we'll be here every week talking about it. Josh, thanks so much. Everyone, be sure to watch Josh Moser on WSVN 7 South Florida, South Florida's #1 news station. Also follow him on Twitter, X, whatever we call it this week, at The Mose Knows, MOZKNOZ, The Mose Knows. Josh, thanks so much. We'll talk to you again, folks. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. Let's hope Miami can salvage this week, and we'll see where things goes. And we'll talk to you again after a while.